Hello, everyone. I hope you're doing well. My name is Anuj, and I'm the moderator for today's exciting event. I would firstly like to thank you for taking the time out to attend this interactive learning power hour session hosted by Harbinger. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, Power Hour is a series of interactive roundtable discussions hosted by Harbinger, where industry stalwarts share their experiences and insights on a particular topic. The topic for today's session is content modernization, smart strategies for your legacy content. Before we begin, a few housekeeping tips. In case you're unable to hear the audio, please ensure you have selected the right speaker for audio output. You may also test the same to see if it's working fine from the audio settings option on the lower left corner of your screen. If necessary, you may please dial in using your phone as well. With that, it's time for the introduction. Our host for today's roundtable is Dr. Vikas Joshi. Dr. Vikas Joshi is a business leader who is passionate about product development and technology entrepreneurship. His mission is to help create software products that makes a difference. A key part of that mission is to inspire tech professionals and entrepreneurs to grow and develop. We welcome you, Vikas, and over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Anuj, and a big hello to everybody here from San Francisco. And hello to my co-panelists, Paul and Praveena and Rohan, and I'll introduce you guys in a moment. Just lovely to have this outstanding panel here. But before introducing, I wanted to spend a few minutes to just set the context of this power hour. So here's our sort of game plan. We do have an exciting power hour lined up for you. First off, we're going to review the basics of learning content modernization. Just what is it? Why is it needed? That sort of stuff. And then we're going to get into reviewing 5 types of modernization requests that we have encountered. And this will help you assess the kind of project you're getting into. And once you've done that, then we go to the strategies that you use for content modernization. And those fall into 3 broad buckets. So we'll see what those are. We'll then take a deep dive into modernization, and we'll hear stories and insights from our panel. And they'll also tell us when to use modernization and when to hold off. So this is really the highlight of the panel, and I'm looking forward to it. And finally, we will sort of do a conclusion. So let's get right through it. First of all, what is modernization and what's driving the need for modernization? Here's the 101, right? Modernization refers to extending the life of learning content that you have already invested in, by keeping it relevant, current, and fresh. And by relevant and current, we mean, making sure that the content is accurate and it's illustrated with examples that resonate with today's audience. And by fresh, we mean the type of user experience and user interface is in line with today's expectations. At the same time, at a deeper level, modernization also includes aligning with the evolving pedagogy and technology. So the way in which people consume learning has changed and it continues to evolve. So following that evolution, some of the content design needs to change, and that's the pedagogical change. Content is delivered on different kinds of devices using different kinds of systems. And again, this technological change causes a shift in content. So those are the sort of basics of content modernization. Now, what's the big deal about content anyway? And I would say over 35% of the L&D budget is allocated to content. And this is according to a Brandon Hall study, a benchmarking study that shows this. And this could be as much as 7 figures worth in many large organizations. So we're talking about significant investments in third-party, non-technical content, which is about 9%, third-party technical content, which is about 8%. So here you're talking about things like Udemy or Coursera or BizLibrary or Skillsoft, that sort of stuff. But then there's also the content development technology. So here you're talking about learning content management systems, authoring and content development tools like Articulate, Captivate, dominKnow, Raptivity, and so on. And then content delivery technology, which is where you have learning management systems and so on. So this is kind of the total picture. And therefore, modernization becomes important because you have invested so much money in it and you want to get the most out of it. So what's driving the need for modernization? I'm going to set the context with one of the drivers of modernization, which is technology. And if you really trace the evolution of e-learning over the years, you can see that every few years, there's a major disruption, right from the times of internet to the time when the Great Recession came in, and then the whole talent management movement, followed by the mobile revolution with iPad, and eventually the cellular phones, and then the BYOD, and now remote learning with COVID in 2020 and so on. So each of these has caused disruptions in the learning, and that kind of every time has led to the need to modernize content. But this is only one example. Let's poll you to find other examples. What kind of changes are you experiencing in L&D? Let's put up the poll for you and pick one or more options. And of course, you can chat in if you don't see here what you wanted to vote for. So let's leave this here for a few seconds. And Anuj, you can share the results when you see that everyone's voted. Thank you. So right there, you can see that moving to new digital platforms, demand for microlearning content, digitization of in-person training, and the need for accessible content. Those seem to be the major drivers here. Let's close the poll. Thank you. What's common in all these changes is that it affects the way you design and develop content. At Harbinger, we help hundreds of enterprises, publishers, academic institutions, and nonprofits in designing and implementing their content modernization strategies. We keep receiving customer requests for proposal all the time. And when we analyze those requests, we see that they fall into one of the 5 types of modernization requests. Classroom to virtual, something that was done in a classroom and now they need to go virtual. So some of the supporting materials like the PowerPoint slide decks and so on, they need to be repurposed for that kind of delivery. Second, technology upgrade. Go from one authoring tool to another, or one learning management system to another, or flash shutdown, so we need to move to another technology. Those would be the examples of technology upgrade. Long courses to microlearning. So there's clearly this movement toward short chunks of learning bites and taking large volumes of content and splitting it into microlearning modules is another driver. Another type we have is design change, right? So in design change, we are talking about changing the look and feel and some sort of a makeover. And for accessibility, here we are talking about people who have accessibility issues, for example, using browsers where you can listen and so on. So those are the things. So in terms of goals, the goal of classroom to e-learning is to convert classes into online formats quickly, consistently, and at scale. And the last part is very important because these are large volumes of content. okay? So if it was a small boutique project, it would be a relatively straightforward issue. But here you're talking about literally thousands of hours of learning. And how do you strategize for that? In technology upgrade, you're talking about upgrading not only the content creation, but the delivery and tracking as well across tools, devices, and systems. Going from long to micro-learning courses, there's two things. One is to keep it short, and the other is to embed it in the flow of work. So the learning needs to be delivered at a point where it is needed most. Implementing a new look, deepening the interaction level, those could be the goals for design change and navigation as well. And from an accessibility perspective, complying with accessibility standards. So this is kind of the menu. So every time a request comes in, we sort of look at this slide and say, okay, what kind of work is this? And usually it's a combination of two or three. But what this does is it gives us a lens to determine what kind of strategies to use. And those strategies is where I'm going next. They fall into three buckets, three generic strategy sets. And we must have, over the years, completed hundreds of projects from large libraries of over 1,000 courses to small custom courses. And in our experience, this set of strategies truly helps in achieving modernization and meeting its goals. The first bucket is learning design-based strategies. And by learning design, we mean putting the learner in the center and creating an environment in which learning has the best shot of occurring, okay? And this is a slightly different view from instructional design, which is much more teacher-inspired or teacher-centered, although it's moving toward learning environment design. So here, one of the principles is learner control, allowing the learner to control the learning experience. So that would imply things like search, for example. Searchability is an example of that. Micro-learning, which we discussed, and progress tracking in a learner-centric environment, which can get tricky. So those are some of the strategies that go in that bucket. And of course, I'm just scratching the surface, but the real stories will come in just a minute. In automation-based strategies, you're talking about templates and scripts that let you take large volumes of courses and convert them, extract assets out of courses, upgrade them, plug them back in, take them from one format, put them into another format. So there is a lot of technical heavy lifting that would save time and save effort to take legacy content and modernize it. And the third bucket is experience design-based strategies. Now, these are strategies that use the knowledge of user experience, user journey mapping, and treating the learner as a user and seeing the learning from their eyes. So how to make it accessible, how to make it responsive when you have different kinds of devices as the learner moves from one to the next, and then how to make it more interactive, okay? So with this now, I think it's going to be time to turn to our esteemed panel and have them talk about some of this and bring it alive. So it's a pleasure to have Paul Schneider, Senior Vice President of Business Development at dominKnow. Our companies, Harbinger and dominKnow, have worked together for over a decade now. Good to have you here, Paul. Thanks. And we do have Praveena. Praveena is a digital learning lead at Bahwan CyberTek. She speaks for the learning experience movement in learning, and it'll be a pleasure to hear your thoughts. Thanks for joining us, Praveena.
Thank you, Vikas. Pleasure to be here.
And we have Rohan Bhosle from Harbinger. Rohan helps customers realize their e-learning vision. Great to have you, Rohan.
Pleasure is all mine, Vikas. Thank you.
So what makes you interested in this topic, Paul? Would you like to go first?
Sure. I think what makes me interested in this topic is really twofold. One, throughout my career, I've always been interested in what's next and how to push the envelope. I've gone from always being on the bleeding edge to let them bleed a little bit, but be right behind it there as I've gotten a little bit older. But strong interest in that. And then dominKnow as a product, we've also, not surprisingly, since I've been with them a long time, have also followed that area too. And we've always been about learner-centric type approach there, and enabling people to develop content that will really meet them at that moment of need. And that's really the trend you've been talking about, and it's been changing there.
Great, great. Praveena?
Well, I think the current landscape as it is for learning and development, the way the technology has changed and the learners have changed, and the way we consume content itself has changed. I think this is a wonderful opportunity for us as designers, as well as the industry itself, to leverage this change in itself. So the fact that performance now is directly linked to training, which is something that we weren't really doing so much before. Earlier, learning was just an additional thing, that something that, there was a compliance check mostly, which was happening. But now the way we look at content and the way we look at learning journeys, this is a wonderful opportunity for us to put the learner in the center and design training around them while meeting business requirements. So considering what we have at the moment and what the industry is faced with, this is what makes the entire journey very interesting for me.
Wonderful. Thank you. Rohan, what are your thoughts? You help a lot of customers and you hear from many corners of the world. What's going on in your mind when it comes to a topic like this?
Absolutely, and I echo with Praveena's point. So the ways in which learning experience have evolved in the recent past, especially due to the pandemic, has been really fascinating to see. So something which kept our learning leaders awake at night was thinking about how do we make learning available in the flow of work. And before they could find out a few ways in which they could make that happen, bang, they got struck by the thought that how could we now make learning available in the flow of work from home, which had its whole different set of challenges altogether. So
right.
One of my key areas of interest has always been to study how the younger generation of learners consume content. So millennials have already been part of the workforce. We have Gen Zs entering the workforce now. And tomorrow we'll have Gen Alphas who have been born and brought up in the digital age. So the way they consume content will be completely different. And I believe modernization is an ever evolving process, but what stays constant and something which we saw is the content piece itself. So which basically gets me excited about this particular topic.
Awesome. Well, great to hear all that. I guess there's a poll coming up now. Talk us through that.
Absolutely. So Anuj will be glad if you can get up the poll for our audience. So we'll be perfect. So which of the below learning priorities are important for you in the coming year to achieve your business goals? So we have a few options there. Again, we saw from our earlier poll, there's a lot of demand for micro learning or revising existing content to fit new modalities. Then we have creating smaller content objects, redesigning the classroom. And if there's any other priority that's there on your list, please feel free to type it in the chat. And yeah, we've also got like a small Brandon Hall research study, which is on the next slide. So we'll just quickly compare both our
sure.
polling. Yes. So
we'll wait for 5 more seconds, maybe.
Yes.
Yeah. 3, 2, 1, go.
Sure.
Yes, we can stop the poll now.
Yeah, we have stopped. There is some lag with my internet, Rohan. I apologize. Would you be able to publish the code?
Please.
Yeah.
Just a second.
Okay.
All right. So there we have the results of revising existing content for new modalities has been on top of the charts there, followed by, okay, we have increasing microlearning as well as redesigning the classroom experience, definitely. So with that, I would like to take you to one of our Brandon Hall research, and let's see what that has to say.
Sure. Let's close this poll and go there.
There you go. So majority of the chunk that we saw, the responses itself, it's more going to increasing microlearning. So we see 70% there. And I would say the other kind of modalities and other ways to modernize content is pretty much in the similar area. So revising existing content, creating smaller learning objects, and redesigning the whole classroom setup. So that's pretty much similar from even what we heard from our audience today. So thank you so much for your votes.
Sure. So I think we have firmly established the drivers for microlearning and the types of requests that are coming in and what people want to achieve. So when you get down to doing this, what are some of the hot buttons? What are the stories, insights, tips from your experience? Maybe we could get Paul and Praveena to weigh in on this and then really have a discussion around this.
Sure. I could go first, Paul, if that's okay with you.
Sure, go ahead.
All right. So I'm going to try and draw upon my experience as an instructional designer, which I've been for the past few years. So what I have noticed is the change in the entire experience, the way we put together content. The focus earlier used to be content. Now the focus is the learner, how we put the learner in the middle of the entire experience. On one hand, we have the performance outcomes and the business goal, how to meet those learning objectives, and on the other hand, how the learners themselves are consuming the content. So considering these 2 points, the way the design has changed is that on one hand, when we look at performance outcomes, we must start with where learners are. Therefore, to be able to understand what is it that they do at their jobs, at their workplace, what motivates them, what is it that they want to get to. Once we have an understanding of that, that is where we begin. And therefore, models like CCAF, which is context, challenge, activity, feedback, as taught by Dr. Michael Allen, which I'm deeply inspired by, and I'm trying to model that in a lot of my designs that I'm currently doing. So context is something that we need to establish within which the entire learning design is focused and the learning activities are focused. So in one of my current projects, which is again a classroom session, which was used to be a classroom session, and now we are converting that to focused activity where we directly put learners into that activity without giving them a whole lot of content in the beginning. So as we were talking about modernization, it's not just about changing technologies or the fact that you want to convert Flash to HTML5. It's about what is it that is going to meet the business outcome. Therefore, we decided that the best way to approach the particular content, which was around system simulations, is to put the learners directly into those activities. And of course, we aid them with videos, with step lists, any help that they want as far as sims are concerned, and guide them to where they need to be. And also Kathy Moore's action mapping, which I'm sure a lot of people in the industry are already aware of, instructional designers are already aware of, where we put the learning goal right in the middle. And then we identify what are those tasks and what are those activities that learners need to perform at their job. And then we model that experience into our design. And the content which they absolutely need to complete those activities is the content that is included in the entire learning experience. Also, things like microlearning, short learning nuggets, we do away with long courses altogether, which is why with our current projects, we identify what is that main content which would aid learners to complete those activities. There's a huge request for videos, especially interactive videos that people can engage with. So it's not just a passive experience for them. They get to engage with those videos and also see the consequence of those choices. So there's an emphasis on consequence-based learning where we show them, what that decision that they're taking, what does that really look like for them when they make that choice? Something that I have been very interested in for the past 1.5 years, I've been engaged with a group called Interactive Storytelling Accelerator Group, where we learn about interactive storytelling, and which I feel is a wonderful way of getting your learners to engage with the content itself. So there's something called cold learners. So cold learners are those people who are not familiar with the content or don't believe that they need to learn anything new, because whatever there is to be learned, they are already aware of it. How do you get them to a place where they should be learning more or would like to engage with the content? Therefore, the entire journey of a protagonist through a series of decisions, which is conflict, which is riddled with conflict, and finally, where they get to a place which is the North Star, which is the learning goal. So this entire journey of that protagonist is what we learn about in interactive storytelling. And I'm trying to do that for a course which is currently running at the moment. And last year, I had put together my very first interactive story on LGBTQ awareness at the workplace. And it was a very interesting experience.
Did we just lose you for a second here? We probably lost you for a second.
Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, now we can. Go ahead.
Okay.
So you were telling us about your first interactive story format.
Yes.
With the LGBTQ at work course.
Right,
yeah.
Right. So that was something that I put together last year, and I worked very closely with my subject matter expert, and it was a journey of a person who, interestingly, does not belong to the community, because we were looking at a sensitization program. Therefore, what does that journey look like for someone who needs to have a shift in their mindset? So it was a very interesting experience for me. It is not on public domain, but I'm trying to put together another interactive story, which possibly in another couple of months, I'm hoping to complete. So as we look at the word cloud here, there are so many words that, I'm able to relate to, like responsive design, of course, is so important, because whatever experience that the learners, the experience that we're trying to help create, they should be able to access that on any device of their choice without compromising on the learning experience. And also, SMEs play such an important role, especially in the context of modernization, because we are talking about few hundreds and if not thousands of hours of existing content, that the role of the SME is very important to be able to sift through and identify what is that piece which can be reused and what are those pieces that we need to do away with or completely rebrand or create new. So I think these are some of the very important part of content modernization, and I think we are at a point in time where we must leverage all of these avenues that we have to be able to create wonderful learning experiences for our learners.
Yeah, that's fascinating, Praveena. Thank you very much. I think this discussion of content modernization, it's high time it went beyond, like you said, Flash to HTML, or just a matter of technical issues around content, but it's really the learning experience that you're talking about, and setting a context in which the learner is inspired to learn, or giving them a goal and then have them encounter content along the way, or taking, essentially using the journey metaphor in which, the hero sort of sets out to bring back the treasure, and then, gets the magic wand in the form of learning, and, encounters challenges and overcomes challenges. All those are very powerful ideas. I also liked what you said about the SMEs, which is that not everything you have has to be modernized. Some of it has to be thrown away simply because it just doesn't make sense in a learner-centric, metaphor. So, all in all, very valuable insights. Let's keep it going, Paul.
Yeah, and I'll kind of talk from a little bit different perspective. But first off, part of it is enabling everything that we just heard. So these are all critical things. And I often like to think about, the folks I work with think about, well, how can we find time to do all this? How can we go ahead and make a change and empower this? And so I kind of think of some things that you really need to have in place, or if you don't have in place, it's just going to make your life that much more difficult. It doesn't mean you can't accomplish some of the same things we talked about, which are critical, but the more you have that in place, the more you're going to be able to do, and the better the experience is to be able to put that learner in. And so, I think of some things like, for example, responsive design. When that first came out, it was all about, oh, now I can take things on my mobile learning. And that is absolutely critical and very important in the approach there. But it's actually more than just that. When you start to have a responsive design, it doesn't allow the screen just to go ahead and change because you have a smartphone. It allows content to change and adjust and morph into different approaches. So, we're all used to traditional slide learning of, the page turns, et cetera there. But we see a lot of customers who are saying, hey, on demand when I need it. So you can, if you have a responsive design and you have the right tools to enable you to do that, you can take that same content and with a flip of a switch, put it into a searchable knowledge base, or like a Pinterest tile approach where the learner is choosing their own adventure in terms of what they're looking at and those nuggets, or finding the information that they want. And that's one of the key things with responsive design, and enabling them to go ahead and journey and find that information how they need it. And we're seeing a lot more customers develop a learning less traditional of that focus, or even hey, let's take a long course and call it micro by chopping up into small pieces there. It's really transforming and changing the way that content is approached. Some other keys that I found with that, and in terms of this, is of course accessibility. And really the key thing when I think about accessibility is the approach called universal design. And it's the idea of, hey, I'm not just like retrofitting or making it accessible so everyone can learn. And we're really experiencing that, hey, there's a lot of folks out there that may have challenges or actually access content in different ways than we might expect, but we don't see that in there. And so the idea of universal design is just like that walkway up into a building, it has a ramp built into the walkway. So you can walk up the ramp or the stairs or glide it up there, roll up there or there. It's the same thing with universal design approach. Fortunately, from a technology standpoint, more and more, all tools are starting to add in capabilities. And one of the key things I would say when you're looking at and moving towards that is that everything to do with accessibility in the tool, it should be part of the workflow. In the old days, and even in modern days today, if you wanted to add accessibility, it's something you have to click on a button, open up a new panel, open it there. So it's outside the workflow of your design. So you're really not thinking about it. It'd be like if you go to design a page, every time you have to add in text, you click on a button, then it opens another panel, you work on the text and then close it, which if you're old enough, you remember there was technology and that's the way it worked, but they quickly over time changed that. And that's sort of the change that we're starting to see in tools, is that workflow is part of the design. So you're not having to think about it after the fact or open up different windows and working with it. Some other things that I think from a design standpoint that really plays up here is the idea of reuse. And I've heard that term battered around a bit. And unfortunately, when I think of reuse, I think of, I have a piece of content, whether it's a graphic or a learning nugget or an objective, and I have it available in 3, 4 different forms, maybe 5, 10, because it applies to different areas or different approaches. I want to make it available for different learners. And then when I update it, it updates everywhere. And that's a huge, huge time saving. Sometimes people say reuse and they think, oh, it's in a central library and I can keep copying it. And that's great for the initial setup. But as soon as you go to change things, you have to redo that process every time. So it's very inefficient. But when you have that reuse, you can have things like one of our other folks that we were working with are modernizing their instructor-led training. And we think of, hey, if we're getting well, instructor-led training will still be there. But what they've done is through reuse, they have multiple audiences that have similar material, talking about a particular piece of technology, but different groups have different specifics. So they're able to use those and then reuse pieces across it, but then each unique individual element is customized or adapted for that environment. And from a modern classroom standpoint, instead of using a traditional PowerPoint, which doesn't get updated or have to pass it around, they're centralizing that in an HTML5 format. Everyone has access to it. When they update it once, it gets updated for all the variations for it, and they can still use it in a presentation, but that same material can also be used for the learner and their students and their notes, or that same material can be used for an e-learning version. And then that author, again, doesn't have to spend the time, and we're able to meet them as a learner at their moment of need and the approach and design that they need. And I'd add in one third element to that, and really, this is a big change, it's been growing over time, is the idea that, hey, in learning, we want to know and tie things back to those objectives. We want to be able to have adaptive learning based on what I know already. And our old technologies of SCORM, they've served us well, but they really don't help us move to that next level. And that's where XAPI has been developed. And that really helps support the back end of everything we're trying to do, because businesses and learners, they want to know that everything is being tracked in terms of performed, whether it's a classroom, like what people are doing in the classroom, and really having those nuggets so they can go ahead and work on it and the instructor can help them out individually, or it's how they're accessing the knowledge base that is not the traditional, I go through it, get my certificate on there, but that doesn't mean they aren't learning and accomplishing those things. So having technology that doesn't require, again, the author to program in JavaScript and do all these things, but it's automatic and it's actually part of the flow. And maybe it's still sending SCORM information in XAPI at the exact same time, so we don't have to, have a cutoff. And with technology there, it's, gets back to that ease of maintenance. But, and if you are changing technology to look for, there are ways to actually take existing libraries of content and mass transfer it into new technologies too. So I like to think of how can we empower everything we discussed there and make it more efficient to actually go ahead and meet those modernization approaches.
Fascinating. So this whole other perspective of using automation and technology and some foresight in planning the content in such a way that not only would changes propagate um, down the line, but you could use the same content objects in multiple contexts and not have to do them over and over every time. Um, thank you for that. Rohan, what's your story? What do you have?
So absolutely, I again, the points that Paul mentioned, it drives towards having like a proper systematic way of going behind the whole modernization strategy. And for that, so Harbinger has, again, before I move into a story, I'd like to just brief you about one of the frameworks we have at Harbinger for modernization. So basically, we've built, a framework to aid modernization, and it is known as the X-Smart framework. So it is nothing but a solution accelerator designed for teams to successfully implement and execute their whole content modernization strategy. So let us talk about the first layer in this framework. So the X factor here is the whole automation piece that you see in the center, which supports in handling volume work. So the sooner we identify what role can automation play in one's modernization journey, the more rapid and cost-effective would be the whole process. Along with this, we've also built custom utility tools which help us extract content from legacy courses and then repurpose them into newer formats. And it is even possible if you don't have the source files available in majority of the legacy cases is what we've seen. And one brief point we touched upon earlier was how to achieve scalability. So in the whole modernization journey. So it's going behind with a templatized approach. Again, in a typical e-learning development, you start off with storyboarding and then move towards the actual development. Having said that, nothing wrong in that approach, but just imagine we're talking about like hours of learning materials to be repurposed. So I don't think that's the best option to move ahead with. So that's where we flipped this approach a little for modernization, where we first analyze legacy courses. And based on the results, we create a template library, which acts as a guiding factor throughout the entire production process. And our instructional designers propose replacing screens within a legacy course based on the new templates that have been developed. And once we have the templates ready and identified for each screen, we can then, then automation plays a role to populate the extracted content back into these templates. So that's the first layer. And then moving on to the second layer of the framework, which talks more about various other aspects you should consider as part of your modernization strategy. So again, we spoke about how learning needs to be available in the flow of work or at the point of need, or just-in-time learning. And the key aspect to make this happen is to ensure that your content is easily searchable. And it could be achieved in two simple steps. So first is instructionally identifying your key learning objectives, and then metadata tagging the content with relevant keywords there. So that'll kind of help us making content easily available to the learners. Again, we spoke about micro-learning. So this is a good time when you can also think about chunking your long courses into bite-sized modules, depending on your key learning objectives. Not necessarily all content needs to be in a micro format, but in case you have to retain the longer courses, you can always use these micro nuggets as reinforcement tools for your learners, which you can roll out after a particular program is done. So that's the micro piece. And moving on to the next one is making courses accessible to ensure the content is available for everyone, even the differently abled audiences. So this is, again, a good time to think about implementing accessibility standards like Section 508 or VCAG 2.0, 2.1, other industry, geography-specific accessibility standards that are out there. And one advantage to implement this at an early stage of the modernization journey is that it can be implemented at a template level and not manually for each and every screen. So it can be like a global global implementation which can be done. And then the other piece is the responsive piece. So again, smartphones and tablets have been an integral part of our lives, not only for communication and entertainment, but a lot of learning consumptions is also happening through smartphones these days. So making sure the modernized courses are device agnostic, and that will be one of the key factors to deliver trainings on the go. The last piece of this framework is the whole trackability aspect, which even Paul touched upon. So SCOM has been around for many years, and definitely it is here to stay. But there's only so much insight that a SCOM package can bring. So stakeholders are looking for even more flexibility and deeper analytics on our learner behavior and performances to ensure they're moving in the right direction to achieve their goals. And this is again a good time to implement some custom trackable features to get better analytics. So yeah, that was a little bit about the framework, and I wanted to share an interesting story on how we supported one of our customers modernize their legacy content. So we work with a catalog e-learning training provider based in Tampa, Florida. So they did online training and continuing education to a broad range of industries, including architecture, engineering, construction, and many more industries. So the ask here was to convert more than 600 hours of legacy Flash-based content to a newer format. And they also wanted like a modern look and feel to it, and implementing Section 508 compliance standards, and making the module searchable as well as in micro format. So in short, basically everything that we saw in the XSmart framework, that was the ask there. And apart from this, they wanted minimum involvement of their internal teams and SMEs. So that was one kind of requirement that they wanted to stay out of this whole modernization handed over to Harbinger. The beauty of it was 80% of the courses did not have source files available. So, and being a catalog company, these courses were, bread and butter for them, and they had to aggressively go to market within the next 5 months. So that was an aggressive timeline we had to achieve. And that's where, again, we came with an end-to-end solution using our XSmart framework, where we designed responsive HTML5 templates, which also supported Section 508 compliance. And then we developed custom utility tools, which helped us automate the whole process of extracting assets from SWF files to developed half-baked courses, and then moving towards the final development. And because it was the timeline was stringent, again, we were able to quickly ramp up our ID and QA teams to achieve these timelines. And I'm happy to say we achieved that within 5 months, way within 5 months. So that was one interesting case I just wanted to share with all of you.
Yeah, that's a great story. I particularly like the twist about not having the source files. So right from there, you have to start using automation. So let's come back to Paul and Praveena now, and just a quick question here. All good ideas are good ideas when they're used in the right place. So some kind of do's and don'ts about when to modernize, when to hold off. Who'd like to go first?
Well, I think I'll go first.
Okay.
So I think it's completely dependent on what the business requirements and objectives are. So if the old course is still meeting those objectives and those requirements, then I think we don't really need to go for modernization as such. If it is instructionally sound, then we can leave it as it is, even if it is built using an old tool, but your LMS can still hold it. It is good to go. However, when there are instances like the content is redundant, or there are inconsistencies in content, or the business goal itself has changed, too much of content, because the entire requirement of converting your instructor-led training to e-learning or to micro-learning, we do away with a lot of content, sometimes as much as 60%, and retain just 40%. And then we decide to do what is appropriate with that 40%. So the instances where we should or shouldn't go would depend on are the old courses accessible? As Vikas just pointed out, the importance of accessibility. We need to be able to cater to all kinds of learners. So if the old courses did not have that, then definitely we need to go ahead with modernization. The design changes themselves, we need to put the learner in the center of the design. What is it that they should be able to do? This is where stakeholders, conversations with stakeholders, the training needs analysis that comes into the picture, the role of the SME, all of it is crucial here to be able to put together that design. And prototyping, again, is a very important part, I feel, which needs to be in place as well as far as this entire ecosystem is concerned. We did talk about the importance of templates and scripts, because there may be instances where you just have a few months to roll the entire thing out and the timelines are strict. Having said that, certain processes should be in place where you are not strictly confining your design to templates. There is also scope for scenarios and consequence-based learning. Every time there is an instance where a long course needs to be chunked into shorter modules and micro-learning, because micro-learning is a huge takeaway from all the surveys that we've looked at today. So when there is a need for people to be able to access that content just in time, then definitely that's an instance where we should go ahead with modernization, and definitely with ILTs, and given the way things are at the moment. We do have virtual ILTs, and I'm sure that's not going to go away anytime soon. Still, we do have on-the-job learning, which is very important, which we see in our projects, which we do internally. New hire onboarding. I've had the opportunity to speak with recent hires when they get onboarded and the kind of training that they undergo, at the end of which the business wants them to be billable and they want them to be productive as soon as possible. So I reached out to the recent hires to understand how effective the training has been for them. And it was very interesting, where they still felt that even though some parts are digitized, there is still a need for them to be paired with mentors and to be paired with their seniors to get that hands-on experience. So wherever there is an opportunity for blended learning, I think modernization is something that we need to look out for.
Okay. Thank you. Paul?
Yeah, I like to think of it as the longer you wait, the more work it's going to be. So there's also pros and cons. And of course, you know, not everyone has infinite time and budget to move forward. So like the great example that Rohan gave us there is, I'm guessing they obviously, the fact that they were Flash and they didn't have the source file said they'd waited a long time. And as you might imagine, the scenario presented there in many cases would be pretty much almost impossible to do what they did. But you know, it's nothing's impossible there, but it did take a lot of effort and a great team effort on the Harbinger team to do that. But as you kind of look at it, you think about what's driving it there. So for example, if you're in a particular situation, the laws change. Like for some folks, that's been, you know, the WCAG driver. The laws have changed, or they hadn't changed, but now they're being called to the carpet if you say that they have to follow the laws. And so you need to go ahead and update all that. So that may cause you to want to go in. And then I would say, hey, if you're having to do that one thing to change it, that's a great time to look at all these other things and potentially do just a little bit more effort and start moving yourself in the right direction towards that. And then reassessing your tool set. Does your tool set enable you to accomplish that one goal of accessibility? But that's all the further you get, and you know you can't get to the next level, and then maybe it's time to change the tool set there. Or perhaps it's a situation like we talked earlier about prototyping, and that's great, is taking a look at how you're going to go ahead and do that, because this isn't just changing the technology. Everyone involved from creating it to consuming it is changing it. And even though maybe a good change, it's still a change, and you need to go ahead and bring everyone else along. So having a course that's a key to the organization, maybe that's going to be the first one you're going to do there and put that out there. And maybe that's also a time to go ahead and put out new tracking technology with XAPI. So not only can you see that, oh yeah, we got a lot of great feedback, it's awesome, but we can see how it's impacting the learning and perhaps tying that to other objectives that you're measuring in the organization. But again, looking back to what you need to change, and then also looking to see, hey, can I not just accomplish one goal, but if I do a little more effort, then I can move towards that modernization journey. And if you wait too long, then you're going to have to really hire a whole team like Harbinger, and hopefully they can do some magic for you.
Great point. Thank you, Paul. So a real quick recap. We are, I think, 4 minutes from the end of Power Hour. Content change is inevitable. A big part of L&D budget is content. With the right strategies and frameworks and some decision-making acumen, you can meet these demands. And we could judiciously use these 3 kinds of generic strategies. And I think Praveena went to a great depth in the learning design strategies, and Paul in the technology-based strategies, and then again the experience-based strategies as well. So with that, I'm going to invite my colleague Anuj to take a minute and tell us a little bit about how Harbinger could help you. Precisely 1 minute.
Sure. Thank you so much, Vikas, and guests and viewers. Please ignore if there is some background noise. So just to talk about Harbinger to our viewers, we started our journey in the year 1990. So being in the e-learning business for more than 30 years has allowed us to witness the evolution of e-learning, right from the early 90s, when corporates were aiming to cut down on training costs. Fast forward today, where we see that technology is playing a key role in learning and development. To lead with innovation in the e-learning space, and that's been our key differentiator, leading with innovation. It could be something like the iSpark framework, which Rohan spoke about, a part of which is a software content extraction framework, which we have, using which you could extract textual data, audio, video, graphics, etc., from your legacy courses, even though you don't have the source files, and you could do it in bulk, hundreds of courses in a short span of time. So innovation in e-learning has been Harbinger's key differentiator. So when you work with Harbinger, you will experience our focus on delivering unique learning experiences, and that too by significantly optimizing cost, learning development cost, and also cutting down on the development timeline. As a group company, just to brief you all, we are a team of 800 professionals, 150 plus out of which are e-learning developers. And so we are large enough to deliver and small enough to care at the same time. We have dual shore operations in India and in the US. We work with clients across industries, right from life sciences, BFSI, EdTech, and also with catalog training providers. Services, with respect to services, we support our clients with end-to-end custom content development, modernization, learning technology services, and solutions. So that's at a high level about us. We have 1 minute left. So if you have any questions, one more thing, one important thing. So we have published this recent ebook on why modernize learning content. And you'll find the link right now available in the chat. We request you to please visit the link and download a copy of it. We have published it together with Brandon Hall Group. If you have any questions, please do write to us, on our email address info@harbingerlearning.com. Almost has any question, put in the Q&A box.
Yeah, and before we let you go, I just want to say that this is a great ebook. I think Brandon Hall has done a very good job of putting together the framework around modernization. So please do feel free to download this free ebook. Won't take more than 15 minutes to read all of it, but it's a very valuable resource. I want to thank Paul and Praveena and Rohan for joining us on this Power Hour. And although we are out of time for questions, we're seriously out of time. Please do write to us, and we'll be happy to follow up.